There's this report on the environmental impact of the oil sands, and it's getting a lot of criticism. It was underwritten by Suncor, we should note, although the scientists involved are beyond repute. They tried to find other sources of funding. What they found was that near oil sands operations, there is, in fact, a great deal of toxics spilled into the environment, but that at a greater radius, it really is negligible. They went 200 kilometers out. But the point is, they're actually finding that, yes, on the location of the mining, it's a problem, but further afield, less of an environmental issue.
Shame on you, Amanda, for being a skeptic. I've been telling you for years now that this industry has done a phenomenal job in protecting the environment. Now that we have the good news, and it's fact by irrefutable scientists that have provided it, let's accelerate these projects. Let's get more money involved. Let's accelerate all the output we can get out of these oil sands, knowing that this is the most environmentally friendly way to extrude energy from the sands. This is wonderful news for not only Canadians today, but our children. Why aren't you getting on top of this and cheering like I am?
I haven't taken a position on either side of this, you might notice. I was just merely pointing out the existence of this report, and then you went off on this crazy rant, which sort of ignores the fact that there is an environmental cost, and at some point, as Canadians, it is worth asking, is the cost worth the benefit? There is a benefit, clearly, but, you know, we do have to keep measuring and weighing.
I've got good news for you again. I speak duck, and I've spoken to the ducks, and they're very excited about this report. They were the first to read it, and it's wingtips up from the ducks.
All right, well, speaking of ducks, and I'll have a moment of silence for the underpaid bankers. Coming up, we'll talk to the lead researcher of that oil sands study that found no visible long-distance pollution from oil sands development, and he'll tell us why, even though the research was funded by Suncor, there is no conflict of interest. Stay with us. Well, there's this new research claiming that beyond a close radius, there's no visible environmental impact from oil sands development. It also finds that lakes are cleaner today than they were decades ago. Roland is the lead researcher of this study and a biology professor at the University of Waterloo. Great to have you with us.
Yeah, thank you.
This is a research that was underwritten by Suncor. So let's start right there, because every story about this has made that point. So is that a frustration to you, and why did you take funding research from Suncor?
All right. Well, you know, the idea for this research started more than 10 years ago, and when the federal and provincial expert panels came and issued sort of a cry for knowing what the natural levels of contamination were, we realized that we had a skill set that could address that. So we went to sources of government funding for academic research, those of us in universities. And we got good peer reviews, but the committees decided that this was in industry's interest, and so industry should pay. And so we were directed, actually, to industry. And that took another couple of years to finally find somebody who was willing to finance it, who saw the value in this. And we did it under terms where the research findings could never be withheld. It was one where we developed the project, we collected the data, we interpreted it, wrote it up in the way that we felt fit without any interference.
So just to be clear in layman's terms, so that I understand this along with everybody else watching, when the industry funded you, in this case Suncor, they had no control over the results at all, I assume. If you found against them, or if you found they had polluted, or if conditions were worse, you would have published that, and there would have been no restriction on that. Am I correct?
That's right. We would have been able to publish those results.
And so let's talk about the results themselves. How meaningful is it that there's no harm at that radius, while there is obviously observable harm much closer?
All right. Well, let me say what we've really contributed here is some knowledge of what the pre-impact conditions were, so what the contaminant levels were coming down the Athabasca River via the air in the centuries and decades before the oil sands came into place. And that was information that was not available by any other means than our study. So I think that's sort of the critical piece that we've provided. And then we were able, at least at one site, to compare what those natural levels of organic contaminants that are being brought down by the Athabasca River, and compare that to recent decades since the oil sands industry has been in existence and growing rapidly, and we couldn't detect a difference.
So true or false, before there was any capitalization of these oil sands, they were seeping contaminants into the river just on a natural basis. And now that we have the benefit to Canada, as we've all seen, we've actually done a good job in making them even less. Is that not the case?
Yeah, I guess what we found is, I mean, there's a few leaks that are known. You know, there's a spill in the 70s and 82 that have been documented. But there's been a lot of concerns that, it's been massive levels of pollution, and the natural levels are actually quite high. There's 100 river kilometers where the same deposit that they take out of the ground there in Fort McMurray, it comes right out in the riverbanks, and that's been eroding into the river. We've done some calculations based on other people's works, and it turns out to be 5,000 to 9,000 tons of bitumen going into the Athabasca River on an annual basis. And if you do the math, that comes out to the equivalent mass as a Exxon Valdez oil spill about every decade. And that's just been trickling down year in, year out, and especially during the flood stages, during the spring melt and when the river ice is moving and grinding that riverbank material and moving it downstream.
All right, obviously an important contribution, Roland. We appreciate you joining us for this.
Okay, thank you very much.
Roland Hall, lead researcher and a professor at the University of Waterloo. Still ahead.